The doorbell rang at exactly 7:30, and I knew my life was about to change forever, not because I'm psychic or anything dramatic like that. I just know Sarah. My wife operates on a schedule tighter than military precision, which is ironic considering what happened next. "David, can you get that?" Sarah called from the kitchen, her voice carrying that particular tone she uses when she's orchestrating something. After 15 years of marriage, I've learned to recognize the difference between her genuine requests and her manipulations. This was definitely the latter. I set down my beer and walked to the front door of our modest Boston suburb home. Through the peephole, I could see a young man in his late 20s, clean-cut, wearing a navy blazer that screamed "trying too hard." He was shifting his weight from foot to foot, nervous energy radiating through the door. "Must be the famous Kyle," I muttered to myself, turning the deadbolt. Sarah had been talking about Kyle for weeks now. Her friend from the gym, her workout partner, her someone who actually listens to me and appreciates my dreams. Each description had grown more pointed, more designed to highlight everything I supposedly wasn't. I opened the door with my best accountant smile, the one I've perfected over 20 years of dealing with difficult clients at Henderson and Associates. Bland, professional, forgettable. "You must be Kyle," I said, extending my hand. "I'm David, Sarah's husband." The young man looked up from adjusting his jacket, and his face went completely white. Not pale, white, like he'd seen a ghost. His mouth fell open, and for a moment, he just stared at me with the kind of recognition that makes your blood run cold. "Sir," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were her husband." The formal address hit me like a punch to the gut. Nobody calls me sir anymore. Nobody has for almost 10 years, not since I left my old life behind and became David Hall, CPA. But this kid, Kyle, he was looking at me like I was still Lieutenant Colonel David Hall, commanding officer of Ghost Unit 7. Sarah appeared behind me, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her smile bright and expectant. She'd dressed up for this dinner, I noticed. The blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, the one she said was too fancy for anywhere we ever go. "Wait," Sarah looked between Kyle and me, her confusion genuine. "How do you know each other?" Kyle's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. His eyes never left mine, and I could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to figure out how to answer that question. The kid was sweating now, despite the cool October evening. "He was my commander," Kyle said finally, his voice stronger but still respectful. "In Middle East, he saved my life twice." The dish towel slipped from Sarah's fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time, which in a way she was. "Commander?" she repeated. "David, what is he talking about? You were an accountant for the Army. You did payroll." I could have laughed at the absurdity of it all. For 10 years, I'd maintained the fiction that I'd been a desk jockey, a numbers guy who happened to serve overseas. Sarah had bought it completely, probably because it fit her narrative of me as boring, predictable David who never did anything exciting. "That's not exactly accurate," I said, stepping back to let Kyle into the house. "Come in, Kyle. I think we need to have a conversation." As Kyle stepped past me, I noticed the way he moved. Economical, controlled, always aware of his surroundings. Military bearing never really leaves you, and Kyle had it in spades. But there was something else, something that made me uneasy, a tension in his shoulders that suggested he was carrying more than just the awkwardness of this situation. "Sarah," I said, closing the door and engaging both locks out of habit, "why don't you finish up in the kitchen? Kyle and I need a minute." "No," Sarah said firmly, crossing her arms. "I want to know what's going on." "David, you told me you pushed papers for 4 years and came home. You never mentioned commanding anyone." I looked at Kyle, who was standing in our living room like he was at attention, even though his posture was casual. His eyes were taking in everything, the exits, the windows, the family photos on the mantle, professional assessment. This kid wasn't just nervous about meeting his girlfriend's husband. "Kyle," I said, my voice taking on the tone I used to use in briefings. "What unit were you with?" 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, sir, but I was attached to your unit for 6 months in 2014. Sarah's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, realization, and then something that might have been fear. "Ghost Unit 7, I said, and Kyle nodded. "What's Ghost Unit 7? Sarah asked, though her voice suggested she didn't really want to know the answer. Special operations, I said simply. Counterterrorism, high-value target elimination, deep reconnaissance, the kind of work that doesn't make it into official reports. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic on Route 1. Normal sounds of normal life, which felt surreal given the conversation we were having. Elimination? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. We did what needed to be done, I said, looking directly at her, to keep people like you safe. Kyle cleared his throat. Sir, if I may, I should probably go. This isn't what I expected. No, I said, and Kyle froze. You're here for dinner, right? Sarah invited you. Let's have dinner. There was something else going on here. Kyle's reaction wasn't just surprise at seeing an old commanding officer. There was guilt there, and fear, and something that looked almost like shame. In my experience, that combination usually meant someone was in trouble. Sarah was still staring at me like I was a stranger. David, we need to talk. Privately. After dinner, I said. Kyle, you said I saved your life twice. Want to tell Sarah about that? Kyle looked like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Sir, I don't think... The IED outside Kandahar, I continued, settling into my recliner. You were point man on a patrol that walked into an ambush. I pulled you out of the eliminate zone while you were unconscious. You carried me 2 miles to the extraction point, Kyle said quietly, with a dislocated shoulder. And the second time? Kyle's jaw tightened. Sniper in Helmand Province. You spotted the laser sight and tackled me. Bullet missed my head by inches. Sarah sank onto the couch, her face pale. David, why didn't you ever tell me any of this? Because it's not who I am anymore, I said, which was mostly true. I came home, I became an accountant, I married you, that life was over. But even as I said it, I was studying Kyle, noting the way his eyes kept flicking to the windows, the slight bulge under his left armpit that suggested a shoulder holster. Old habits die hard, and my instincts were screaming that something was very wrong with this picture. Kyle? I said casually, what do you do for work these days? Private security, he said quickly. Corporate stuff mostly, nothing exciting. Who do you work for? Small firm, you probably haven't heard of them. That was a lie. I could tell because Kyle's left eye twitched slightly when he said it. A tell I remembered from our time overseas. Kyle had been a terrible poker player. The timer in the kitchen went off and Sarah jumped like she'd been shot. Dinner's ready, she said, standing up unsteadily. I'll just go check on everything. After she left the room, I leaned forward in my chair and fixed Kyle with the stare that used to make hardened sergeants confess their sins. Want to try that again, soldier? Kyle's military bearing cracked slightly. Sir, I can't. It's complicated. Uncomplicated. I work for a private intelligence firm. They asked me to get close to Sarah. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. Why? They wanted information about you, sir, about your current activities. What current activities? I'm an accountant. Kyle looked miserable. Sir, we both know that's not entirely true. He was right, of course. David Hall, CPA, was real enough. I did work for Henderson and Associates, and I was good at it. But David Hall also ran a side business that very few people knew about. Obsidian Solutions, a private intelligence and security firm that specialized in the kind of problems that couldn't be solved through official channels. Who do you really work for, Kyle? I can't tell you that, sir, but they know about Obsidian. They know about your client list. My blood ran cold. Obsidian's client list was worth millions to the right buyer, or the wrong one. Corporate executives, government officials, foreign nationals who needed problems solved quietly and efficiently. If that information fell into the wrong hands, it wouldn't just destroy my business. It would get people eliminated. How long have you been sleeping with my wife? Kyle flinched. 3 months, sir, but I never meant for it to go this far. She was just supposed to be a way to get close to you, to your home computer, your files. But she's a good person, sir. She deserves better than this. Better than what? A husband who lies about his past, or a boyfriend who's using her to commit espionage? Before Kyle could answer, Sarah returned with a forced smile and an announcement that dinner was served. We moved to the dining room in awkward silence, taking our seats around the table she'd set with our good china. Another sign that this dinner was more important to her than she'd let on. So, Sarah said brightly, serving the pot roast she'd spent all afternoon preparing, now that I know you two have history, maybe you can tell me some stories about David. He never talks about his time in the service. Kyle and I exchanged glances. There were stories, all right, but none of them were suitable for dinner conversation. Your husband was the best officer I ever served under, Kyle said diplomatically. He brought all of us home alive. Not all of us, I corrected quietly. The weight of that statement settled over the table like a shroud. Sarah looked between us, clearly sensing the undercurrents she couldn't understand. David, she said softly, you never told me anyone died. People always die in war, Sarah. The trick is making sure it's the right people. Kyle shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Sir, maybe we should... Tell me about your mother, Kyle. I interrupted, a piece of the puzzle suddenly clicking into place. Elena Voss. How is she these days? Kyle's fork clattered against his plate. Sarah looked confused, but I was starting to see the bigger picture, and it was uglier than I'd thought. You know my mother? Kyle's voice was barely audible. We've never met, but I know of her. Arms dealer, money launderer, widow. Her husband died in Middle East in 2014, eliminated by American forces during a raid on a weapons cache. Sarah was looking back and forth between us like she was watching a tennis match, completely lost. David, she said, what does any of this have to do with... Your boyfriend's mother has been looking for revenge against the unit that eliminated her husband, I said, never taking my eyes off Kyle. And that unit was Ghost 7, my unit. Kyle's face crumpled. Sir, I'm so sorry, I never wanted any of this. But she has leverage over me. Things I did after I got out, things I'm not proud of. She said if I didn't help her, she'd destroy my life. So instead you decided to help her destroy mine. I thought if I could just get some basic information, prove you weren't a threat anymore, she'd let it go. But then I met Sarah, and she's wonderful, and I realized how good you have it here, and I couldn't what? Couldn't go through with it. Sir, I never gave her anything useful, I swear. Sarah finally found her voice. What the hell is going on here? David, who is Elena Voss? And Kyle, what do you mean you couldn't go through with it? Go through with what? I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope I'd been carrying around for 3 days, ever since I'd found it slipped under my office door. I tossed it onto the table between the pot roast and the mashed potatoes. Open it, I told Sarah. With shaking hands, she opened the envelope and pulled out a series of photographs. Her face went white as she looked through them. Pictures of our house, our cars, her leaving for work, me coming home. Surveillance photos taken over the course of months. These were taken from Kyle's apartment, I said, along with detailed notes about our daily routines, our habits, our vulnerabilities. Sarah looked at Kyle with an expression of betrayal that cut deeper than any knife. You were watching us? Watching me? Sarah, please, let me explain. Explain what? That everything between us has been a lie? Kyle reached for her hand, but she jerked away from him. It started as a lie, he said desperately, but it became real. What I feel for you is real. Get out, Sarah said quietly. Sarah, get out, she screamed, standing up so fast her chair toppled backward. Kyle looked at me and I nodded toward the door. You heard the lady. As Kyle gathered his jacket and headed for the door, I called after him. Kyle, this isn't over. Your mother and I are going to have a conversation. He paused at the door. Sir, she's not going to stop. She's been planning this for 5 years. You eliminated her husband, and now she wants to destroy everything you care about. Then she should have come for me directly. After Kyle left, Sarah and I sat in silence for a long time. The pot roast grew cold, the candles burned down, and the grandfather clock chimed 8, then 9, then 10. Finally, Sarah spoke. Is any of our marriage real, David? Or have you been lying to me about everything? I never lied about loving you. I said, everything else, I was trying to protect you from who I used to be. And who were you, exactly? I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and realized that our marriage had been built on a foundation of half-truths and careful omissions. She'd fallen in love with a fiction, and I'd let her, because it was easier than explaining that her husband had blood on his hands. I was a butcher, Sarah. A government-sanctioned, highly trained butcher. And apparently, I still am. The phone rang at 3 in the morning, jolting me from a restless sleep. Sarah hadn't come to bed. She was in the guest room, probably staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything that had happened at dinner. I grabbed my cell phone from the nightstand, noting the block number. David Hall, I answered, my voice automatically shifting into the professional tone I used for late-night obsidian business. Hello, Lieutenant Colonel. The voice was electronically distorted, processed through a voice changer that made it impossible to determine gender or age. Or do you prefer Mr. Hall these days? I sat up in bed, instantly alert. Who is this? You can call me Monarch. I believe you've met one of my associates. If you mean Kyle, yes, charming kid, terrible at operational security. A sound that might have been laughter came through the phone. Kyle was never meant to be subtle. He was meant to be discovered. Did you really think I'd send an amateur to infiltrate the home of David Hall? I was already moving, pulling on clothes with one hand while keeping the phone pressed to my ear. If this was Elena Voss or one of her people, they might already be moving against Sarah or me. What do you want? I asked, moving to the window and checking the street. Everything looked normal, suburban, quiet, empty sidewalks, porch lights, casting pools of yellow illumination. I want what you took from me, Monarch said. But first, I want you to understand what you're dealing with. Check your email. I moved to my home office, converted bedroom that Sarah thought contained nothing more interesting than tax returns and client files. She'd never looked closely at the reinforced door or the additional locks I'd installed. The computer was already booting up as Monarch continued talking. You eliminated my husband, David, shot him in the head while he was trying to surrender. I've eliminated a lot of people, I said, pulling up my encrypted email account. You'll have to be more specific. Helmand Province, October 15th, 2014. A weapons cache hidden in a compound outside Lashkar. You and your team were supposed to secure the location and wait for intelligence officers to arrive. Instead, you executed everyone inside. The memory came flooding back. A night raid that had gone sideways when we discovered the weapons cache was being used to store chemical weapons components. Intel had been wrong about it being a simple arms deal. We'd found evidence of a planned attack on a school in Kabul, hundreds of children who would have died if those weapons had reached their destination. Your husband was building chemical weapons to use against civilians, I said, opening the email that had just arrived. He got exactly what he deserved. He was trying to surrender when you shot him. He was reaching for a detonator that would have eliminated my entire team and destroyed evidence of a terrorist plot. The email contained a single video file. I hesitated for a moment, then clicked play. The footage was grainy, clearly taken from a security camera, but the image was clear enough. It showed Sarah leaving her office building, walking to her car in the parking garage. The timestamp showed it had been recorded earlier that evening, while Kyle was having dinner at our house. Impressive, I said, though my blood was running cold. You had people watching her while your boy was here, playing the remorseful soldier. I have people watching everyone you care about, David. Your wife, your business partner, Ben, your elderly parents in Florida, even your clients at Henderson and Associates. I was already pulling up the security feeds from my real office, the one where Obsidian Solutions operated out of a converted warehouse in South Boston. Everything looked normal there to you, but that didn't mean much. If Elena Voss had the resources to mount a surveillance operation this extensive, she had the resources to avoid my cameras. What do you want? I asked again. I want you to suffer the way I suffered. I want you to lose everything you care about, piece by piece, until you're begging me to just eliminate you and end it. And then I'll eliminate you anyway. The line went dead. I sat in the dark for a moment, processing what I'd learned. Elena Voss, Monarch, had been planning this for 5 years. She'd found Kyle, probably through military records, and turned him into an asset. She'd been watching us for months, learning our routines, our weaknesses, our pressure points. But she'd made a mistake. She'd revealed herself too early, probably because Kyle had grown a conscience and she needed to accelerate her timeline. That gave me an advantage if I could figure out how to use it. I pulled up Kyle's file on my computer. I'd run a background check on him the day after Sarah first mentioned him, because paranoia is a survival trait in my business. Kyle Mason, 29 years old, served with distinction in Middle East until 2015, when he'd been discharged after a training accident that left him with a permanent limp and a medical retirement. What the official records didn't show was what had happened after that. Kyle had struggled with PTSD, fallen into debt, and eventually gotten involved with some unsavory people in Boston's underground gambling scene. Perfect leverage for someone like Elena Voss. I was about to dig deeper when I heard a sound from downstairs, the soft click of the front door opening. I drew the Glock 19 from my desk drawer and moved to the top of the stairs listening. David? Sarah's voice, but strained, frightened. I'm here, I called back, keeping the tool ready but out of sight. Are you okay? There's someone here, she said. Someone who wants to talk to you. I moved down the stairs slowly, staying in the shadows. Sarah was standing in the living room, still wearing the blue dress from dinner. Behind her, sitting in my recliner like he owned the place, was a man I'd never seen before. He was in his 50s, well-dressed, with the kind of bearing that suggested military background. His hands were folded calmly in his lap, and he was smiling at me like we were old friends. "Mr. Hall," he said, "please join us. And you can put the tool away. If I wanted to hurt your wife, she'd already be dead." I kept the Glock ready but lowered it to my side. "Who are you?" "Call me Bishop. I work for Monarch." "Let me guess. You're here to deliver another threat." "Actually, I'm here to make you an offer." Sarah was standing frozen between us, her eyes wide with fear. I could see her trying to process this new reality, that her boring accountant husband was having a conversation about death threats with a stranger in their living room at 3 a.m. "Sarah," I said gently, "go upstairs." "No," Bishop said. "She should hear this. After all, it concerns her." I raised the tool again. "She goes upstairs now." Bishop shrugged. "As you wish. Mrs. Hall, if you would." Sarah looked at me, then at Bishop, then back at me. "David, what's happening?" "Go upstairs, lock the bedroom door, and call 911 if you hear fire shots." "Fire shots?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Go, now." After Sarah left, I moved to where I could keep both Bishop and the front door in sight. "What's your offer?" "Monarch is willing to let your wife live," Bishop said conversationally, "in exchange for your client files and your complete cooperation in dismantling Obsidian Solutions." "That's not an offer. That's extortion." "Semantics." Bishop reached into his jacket slowly, pulling out a tablet computer. "Would you like to see what we have planned for your wife if you refuse?" The tablet showed a detailed floor plan of Sarah's office building, complete with security camera locations, guard rotations, and escape routes. There were photos of her daily routine, her coworkers, even her favorite coffee shop. "We could take her at any time," Bishop continued. "But Monarch prefers a more artistic approach. Did you know your wife is pregnant, Mr. Hall?" My blood turned to ice. "What? 3 weeks along, she doesn't know yet and the symptoms haven't started. But we know. We've been monitoring her medical records, her pharmacy purchases, even her menstrual cycle." The tool was shaking in my hand now, and I had to force myself to breathe slowly. Sarah was pregnant. We'd been trying for 2 years, and now, in the middle of this nightmare, it was finally happening. "Congratulations," Bishop said with mock sincerity. "You're going to be a father. The question is whether you'll live long enough to meet your child. If you touch her, you'll what? Eliminate me? You're outnumbered, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. Monarch has been planning this operation for 5 years. Every contingency has been considered." I looked at the tablet again, studying the details of their surveillance. It was professional work, thorough and well-coordinated. But there was something about it that bothered me, something that didn't quite fit. "You made a mistake," I said. "Oh? You're showing me too much. If you really had this locked down, you wouldn't need to convince me. You'd just act." Bishop's smile faltered slightly. "Perhaps we simply want you to understand the futility of resistance. Or perhaps you're not as in control as you want me to believe." I was studying his face now, looking for tells. Bishop was good, but he wasn't perfect. There was tension around his eyes, a slight tightness in his jaw that suggested he was under pressure. "You have 24 hours to decide," Bishop said, standing up. "After that, we start taking pieces. First your wife, then your business, then everyone else you care about. And if I give you what you want, then you get to live with the knowledge that you failed to protect the people who trusted you again." He moved toward the front door, then paused. "Oh, and Mr. Hall, don't bother trying to run. We'll find you wherever you go. And don't bother calling the police. We have people inside law enforcement who will make sure any investigation disappears." After Bishop left, I stood in my living room for a long time thinking. Elena Voss had resources, connections, and a 5-year head start. But she'd also made the classic mistake of underestimating her enemy. She thought David Hall, the accountant, was a soft target, a man who'd left his dangerous past behind and wouldn't fight back. She was about to learn that some things never change. I was still a butcher. I'd just gotten better at hiding it. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Instead, I sat in my office, going through every file I had on Elena Voss and her organization. By dawn, I had a clearer picture of what I was dealing with, and it was worse than I'd thought. Elena Voss wasn't just an arms dealer looking for revenge. She was a major player in international money laundering, with connections to terrorist organizations, pill cartels, and corrupt government officials across 3 continents. Her husband's passing had been a setback, but she'd used the 5 years since then to expand her operation and consolidate power. What worried me most was how much she knew about Obsidian solutions. My client list was worth millions to the right buyer, but it was also a death sentence for everyone on it. Corporate executives who'd hired me to eliminate business rivals, government officials who'd needed embarrassing problems to disappear, foreign nationals who'd paid for intelligence on their enemies. If their names became public, the body count would be astronomical. Sarah came downstairs at 7, dressed for work, but moving like she was in a daze. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table without saying a word. "We need to talk," I said. "Do we?" Her voice was flat, emotionless. "Because I'm starting to think I don't know who you are at all." "You know who I am. You just don't know what I do. What you do is lie to me. What you do is put us both in danger. What you do is bring armed strangers into our home at 3 in the morning. I sat down across from her, trying to find the right words. "Sarah, there are things about my past." "Your past?" She laughed bitterly. "David, you're still doing it. Whatever it is. That man last night, he wasn't talking about something that happened 10 years ago. She was right, of course. I'd never really left Ghost Unit 7 behind. I'd just found a way to monetize the skills I'd learned there. I run a private security company, I said. We handle situations that can't be resolved through normal channels." "What kind of situations?" "The kind where people get hurt if we don't intervene." Sarah stared at me for a long moment. "Are you telling me you're some kind of vigilante? I'm telling you I'm good at solving problems, and people pay me very well to solve their problems." "What kind of problems, David?" "Specifically." I could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't going to let this go, and after last night, she deserved the truth. Industrial espionage, political blackmail, witness protection, asset recovery. Sometimes we gather intelligence, sometimes we eliminate threats. "Eliminate threats," she repeated slowly. "You mean eliminate people?" "Sometimes." Sarah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need to process this. I'm going to work." "Sarah, you can't go to work. It's not safe." "Not safe from who? Your enemies or you?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "From people who want to hurt you to get to me. And whose fault is that?" I didn't have an answer for that. Sarah grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "Sarah, wait. There's something else you need to know." She turned back, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. "You're pregnant," I said. The color drained from her face. "What?" 3 weeks. The people who were here last night, they've been monitoring your medical records. They know." Sarah sank against the doorframe. "How could they possibly know if I don't even know? Because they've been watching us for months. They know everything about our lives, our routines, our vulnerabilities." "Our baby," she whispered. "They know about our baby." "I'm going to protect you," I said. "Both of you, I promise." "How? How can you protect us from people who can hack medical records and break into our house whenever they want?" "By doing what I do best." Sarah looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not just fear, but something that might have been disgust. "You're going to eliminate them," she said, "if that's what it takes." "And what happens to us then? What happens to our child when their father is a butcher?" "Their father is already a butcher, Sarah. I'm just going to be a butcher who keeps his family alive." She left without another word. I spent the morning making preparations. First, I drove to the Obsidian Solutions office, a nondescript warehouse in an industrial section of South Boston. To anyone who bothered to check, it was registered as a consulting firm that specialized in risk assessment for international businesses. The reality was somewhat different. Ben Rodriguez was waiting for me in the main office, a cup of coffee in one hand and a pistol in the other. Ben had been my sergeant in Ghost Unit 7, and when I'd started Obsidian, he'd been my first recruit. He was also the closest thing I had to a best friend. "Heard you had some visitors last night," he said. "News travels fast. I've had surveillance on your house since Kyle Mason showed up. When I saw armed men going in, I figured you'd want backup." "You were watching?" "From across the street. If things had gone sideways, I was ready to intervene." Ben was good at his job, which was why I'd stayed alive as long as I had. He was also completely loyal, which was a rare commodity in our business. "What do we know about Elena Voss?" I asked. Ben pulled up a file on his computer. "More than I'd like. She's got operations in 12 countries, a private army of about 200 men, and enough money to buy her way out of any legal trouble. She's also completely insane. Define insane. She once had a business rival's entire family eliminated because he underbid her on a weapons contract. Not just the rival, his wife, his kids, his parents, even the family dog. Then she sent photos of the bodies to all her other competitors as a warning. Charming. What about her connection to Kyle? Kyle's mother died when he was 16. Elena found him in a VA hospital, strung out on painkillers and drowning in gambling debt. She paid off his debts, got him clean, and then owned him. And now she's using him to get to me. Was using him. Kyle's dead. I looked up from the file. What? Found this morning in his apartment, single fire shot to the head, execution style. Probably happened right after he left your house. I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. Kyle had been a pawn, but he'd also been a kid who'd gotten in over his head. He'd tried to do the right thing in the end, and it had gotten him eliminated. Elena's cleaning house, I said. Gets worse. I've been monitoring police communications. There was another body found this morning, a man named Bishop, shot in his car about 6 blocks from your house. The man who'd threatened my wife was dead, eliminated by his own people. Elena was eliminating anyone who could connect her to the operation. She's going to ground, Ben said, which means she's about to make her move. I was about to respond when my phone rang. Sarah's number. David? Her voice was shaking. There are men here. At my office. They say they want to talk to you. Where are you? In the bathroom on the 3rd floor. I locked the door, but I don't think that's going to stop them for long. I'm on my way. Stay on the line. I was already moving, grabbing my gear from the weapons locker. Ben was right behind me. How many men? I asked Sarah. I don't know. I saw at least 3 in the lobby. They had badges, said they were federal agents, but something felt wrong. What kind of badges? FBI, I think, but they didn't look right. Too new, too shiny. Fake federal agents. Elena was escalating faster than I'd expected. Sarah listened to me carefully. Is there another way out of that bathroom? There's a window, but we're 3 floors up. Is it a drop ceiling? Yes, why? Can you reach the ceiling tiles? I think so. Good. I want you to climb up into the ceiling and make your way to the stairwell. Stay on the line and do exactly what I tell you. Ben and I were in the car now, racing through Boston traffic towards Sarah's office building. I had a sick feeling that we were going to be too late. David. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. I can hear them outside the door. They're trying to pick the lock. Move now. Get into the ceiling. I could hear scraping sounds. Then Sarah's labored breathing as she pulled herself up into the crawl space above the bathroom. I'm in, she said. It's dark up here. Move toward the stairwell. Follow the emergency lighting. David, I'm scared. I know. Just keep moving. I'm almost there. Ben took a corner at 50 miles per hour, tires screaming against the asphalt. We were still 10 minutes away. They're in the bathroom, Sarah whispered. I can hear them below me. Keep moving. Don't stop. David, I think I'm bleeding. My heart stopped. What do you mean? Something's wrong with the baby. I think I'm losing the baby. Just focus on getting out of there. We'll worry about everything else later. But I knew what stress could do to a pregnancy, especially in the first trimester. Elena Voss wasn't just trying to eliminate my wife, she was trying to eliminate my unborn child. I can see the stairwell, Sarah said. There's a ceiling tile right above the door. Good. Drop down into the stairwell and head for the roof. The roof? Trust me. I could hear sounds of exertion as Sarah lowered herself down, then the echo of her footsteps on concrete stairs. David, there are more men in the stairwell. They're coming up. How many floors above you? 2, maybe 3. Run! Get to the roof! Ben pulled into the parking lot of Sarah's building, and I could see the fake federal agents' cars, black SUVs with government plates that were probably stolen. There were at least 6 men inside the building, all armed, all hunting my pregnant wife. I'm on the roof, Sarah said, breathing hard. No, now what? Stay away from the edges. I'm coming for you. Ben and I entered the building through the parking garage, using a service elevator to avoid the lobby. I could hear fire shot from somewhere above us. The fake agents were getting frustrated and abandoning any pretense of subtlety. Sarah, are you still there? Yes, but David, there's a helicopter coming. I looked at Ben, and we both knew what that meant. Elena wasn't just trying to abduct Sarah. She was trying to extract her. Once they got her on that helicopter, I'd never see her again. Ben, you take the stairwell. I'm going up the outside. The outside? David, we're 12 stories up. I've done it before. I'd climbed the outside of buildings in Middle East, usually under enemy fire. This was just another day at the office. Except this time it was personal. The fire escape was on the north side of the building, rusted and probably not up to code, but it would have to do. I climbed as fast as I could, my hands slipping on the wet metal, the wind whipping around me as I got higher. Below me, I could hear Ben engaging the fake agents in the stairwell. Gunfire echoed through the building, and I hoped he was winning. Sarah, the helicopter, how close is it? It's landing. David, there are men getting out. How many? 4. They have tools. I reached the roof access door and found it locked. A quick application of C4 from my kit solved that problem. The explosion echoed across the rooftop, and I could see Sarah crouched behind an air conditioning unit about 50 feet away. The helicopter was a military surplus Black Hawk, painted black with no identifying markings. 4 men in tactical gear were advancing on Sarah's position, their weapons raised. I put 3 rounds into the nearest man before they knew I was there. The other 3 took cover behind the helicopter, returning fire. Sarah screamed and pressed herself lower behind the air conditioning unit. "Stay down," I shouted, moving to flank the remaining gunmen. One of them broke cover, trying to reach Sarah. I put 2 rounds in his chest, and he went down hard. The other 2 were smarter, using the helicopter for cover while they tried to coordinate their attack.